Hi, I'm Michael, founder of Spotlight. Let me show you how Spotlight works today, the beginning of January 2026. It changes all the time, so this is where we're at today. So the first thing you do is find the prompts that the brand would want to appear in. So here, for example, this is an example on Nespresso. Here are the prompts that Nespresso wants to appear in their responses. For example, which single-serve coffee machines offer the best value for espresso lovers? So Nespresso want to appear in the response. So what we do, so first of all, the system helps the brand find prompts that are relevant to them. We have a few tools that help you do that by converting keywords that you use for search into a prompt. And we have a prompt volume tool. I'll show you here. We have this tool that is proprietary. That's a prompt volume tool that essentially you enter your keywords from search and it goes out and finds the prompts that people are actually using in the last 2 months in the target market the report is for. It shows you the prompts and their volumes. It's a relative index. This is a proprietary index that we built based on different types of data sources, which is a real-time user prompts and based on data from the Google ecosystem that's highly correlated with AI prompting and models that are trained on interactions between humans and older models, so they know the prompts. So it's a pretty complex topic. You can read about this within the app, and we have a blog post about this, where we get the prompt volumes. So we help the brands, we help you find the prompts that have high volume and that are aligned with your marketing objectives. So after you set up the prompts and topics that you want to follow, we then send the prompts to all of the models. We support all of the main models. For example, let's go into look at this prompt, which brands offer premium coffee capsules for home use. So we send this prompt to all the models, for here, for example, to ChatGPT, and we see the response that ChatGPT gave us in the US in this case. And we see that Nespresso was the first brand that was mentioned out of 7 brands that were mentioned in this response. So we note that. And then we also analyze the sentiment of the mentioning of the brand. So here the sentiment was positive around the mentioning of Nespresso. And we capture all the data sources, all the citations and data sources that were used by the ChatGPT in order to respond, in order to write this response. And most importantly, we capture also the fan-out queries, meaning the queries that ChatGPT itself used in the backend on Google and Bing to search for content in order to base its response. And these are the actual queries that ChatGPT used in order to find these links. And we're going to use this a lot in a moment. I'll show you how we use this. So what we have here is essentially for every topic that we have an overview of what percent of the responses our brand appeared. So here we see the percent of the brand presence. And we also see the average position, the rank within the response when the brand was mentioned. So here, on average, Nespresso appeared between the second and third place in the response. And we have a sentiment percentage, and we can see which other brands appeared alongside in the responses. And we have this data on a weekly basis. We run this data every week. Now, we have all this data for each one of the topics that we care about, and we can add topics and remove topics and add and remove prompts. And then we can see all this data, and we can see all the data also per model. So for example, we can see how AI is performing in AI overviews or ChatGPT or Perplexity. And we can see this data also in the eyes of our competitors. For example, here we can see a Keurig or a Breville. We can take other brands and see all the data and all the metrics and see how our competitors or other brands perform per each one of these topics and each one of the models. Now we take this, we take the brands and, we take the prompts and we classify them according to customer journey stage. So for example, you can see what is the presence of our brand per each one of the stages. For example, awareness, consideration, decision stages, or what is the sentiment around the mentioning of the brand per stage. Or we can see which other brands are ranked for each one of these stages. We can also see other metrics of our brand versus competitors. So you can look at the competitive landscape. We have all kinds of analyses for the competitive landscape. Now, the more interesting thing to see actually is how do we change? How do we improve our presence? And that's where our edge comes in. And most of our focus is on action items and making a change and creating impact. So what we do here, essentially, we pull all of the data sources that the models base their responses on. Now, the majority of times that you send a prompt to the different models, they check for fresh data on the web and they pull external data sources. So here we can see actually where the models are getting their information. So for example, we can see that Reddit has been quite big for Nespresso responses. So we can see that 164 responses in this report cited content from Reddit, and specifically 17 of the responses cited this specific Reddit post. And then we can open and see which were the prompts and which were the models that cited this specific post. So we can see here, for example, which content of the brand is working and is actually affecting the models, and which content of our competitors are affecting the models, or where there might be an opportunity to place content. And we'll talk about these action items in a moment. Now, we also have this view here that shows us all of the prompts in which our brand did not appear in the response. And what this actually helps us do is to prioritize based on the volume, the prompt volume, which prompts we might want to write content in order to appear in. So let's take, for example, this one. So what are the top rated espresso machines for home use? Espresso did not appear in the response to this prompt for all of these 5 models. So what we have here is a button where we click Smart, which is actually going to take us into this section that will now analyze for us all the data sources that the models used in order to respond to this prompt, and is also going to take the search queries that it used in order to search for content to respond to this prompt. So that we're going to take these and we're going to analyze the sources and the keywords, and then the system is going to find properties that are shared, that are common across the data sources. It's going to learn, well, what is it about these data sources that's making them cited by the model, and then it's going to suggest content that is either aligned with these data sources, it shares the same properties, and also it's going to suggest content that is totally different and actually suggests something fresh. It actually responds to the same search terms, but it will offer a fresh perspective, because we see that models, they like to cite also content that offers something different and it can bring some value into the discussion. So here what we can see, for example, I found 14 listicles, for example, and it found also 6 articles, and it analyzed them. And they have a summary here of the listicles, and it shows also a histogram showing how fresh the current cited content is. And the older that the content is, the more of an opportunity we have, because the models prefer more fresher content. If you see like here, the majority of the content actually is older than 3 months old. So we have a good opportunity to write content, and there's a higher chance that we will appear, that the model will select our content for its response. So we have all kinds of stats about the sources, the current sources, the data sources that have been used by the models to make a response. And here we can see content suggestions that are aligned with the cited sources. These share the same properties that the cited sources also have. And here we have different pieces of content that no data source wrote about, but still address the prompt. So let's say, and my best practice is to take one that's different and one that's aligned, and then you try them both. So let's take, for example, this one over here. Let's take this listicle suggestion, and let's change this, and let's create this content. You could actually also just copy the brief and create the content by yourself, but I want the system to create the content for me, because why would I want to work hard? So let's take, for example, I'm just going to change this to 2026. And so what this section does, it actually creates content for you. It takes the brief, a title, or this is optional, and the target search keywords that you want the content to optimize for. And you can enter also the brand information or the tone of voice, custom instructions, or competitor information. All this data will only help improve the content that it'll create. And then I'm going to run this. And what it's going to do now in the back end, it's going to create content that's geo optimized, that has all the properties that we find that are working the best today on the models, that include citations, quotes, an FAQ section, and headers that are in a question form, and self-contained statements, and all kinds of properties that we find that are working the best. So it takes the latest of the research from the system and then generates a piece of content that is optimized. So here, for example, we have this piece of content. It's ready to go. This is a piece of content that is going to give you all the content that you need. It has all the properties that you want for an ideal piece of content, and you can then edit it. You can upload it directly to WordPress, so you'll be able to upload to other platforms. This is ready to go to post and to try. Now, how do we know this works? So what we do, we track all of our content. So we have a section here called the citation tracker, which looks at every piece of content that we own. It could be from our domain, or it could be from other websites that maybe content that we place in other places. It could be YouTube or content that we actually own. And it'll show us the performance. So here, for example, we can see that this piece of content here, we can see how well it's performing. That we can see that, for example, that AI overview and AI mode, we can see the actual prompts that cited this piece of content. So we know how well our content is performing. And we also can see here what's our share of the overall citations. For example, our own content for Nespresso here. So So 2.2% of all of the citations are actually content that Nespresso owns, which is not bad. So you can break this down by LLM and you can export this data. Now, we also track Google Analytics traffic, GA4. This is just sample data. But if you connect your Google Analytics account, it will show you how much traffic is coming in from the LLMs directly, from which LLM, and most importantly, to which content. So we know what's working. We have another data point. And now, just that you know, I mean, most users do not go directly from the model, from LLMs, into the websites. They typically read about a brand or a product, and then they go to a search and they navigate directly from there. But this is another data point that can be useful, especially for events like conversions, things like that. Now we have another tool I want to show you. We have this tool over here that takes existing content and analyzes it and scores it and shows you where are you versus best practices, where you can maybe improve. If it's all kinds of technical factors or if it's all kinds of content related factors, it'll help you improve your existing content. Now we have another tool here that talks about not whether your brand appears in the AI models or in the responses, but rather when people ask about you, what is your reputation among the AI chatbots? These are branded prompts, essentially a prompt. For example, how is Nespresso perceived in terms of quality of its coffee and coffee machines? So we send that prompt to the models and we look at the response, and then the model scores the response. And also it explains how it scored it. And so you can actually track for each of these properties and for each of the models, you can track and see how your brand is perceived by the models. And you can add more branded or perception prompts like this and even tell the system what you consider a good or a bad response so it knows how to score it. So this is, and you can track this over time. And we have tools to help you manage your reputation by finding the data sources, and we have all kinds of tools. Now, I want to show you two more things. One thing is a news section here, which talks about how models or how the models are currently looking for content. I mentioned this earlier about the fan out queries. Essentially, if you look at any one of these prompts, you will see how the models in the backend are searching Google and Bing to get their data. And this is highly valuable because you want to optimize your content on these search queries that they are performing. This is what you want to optimize for. So we have all this data here. We have this data for ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Grok at the moment. Those are the three models that we're able to get this data from. And this is integrated into our system, into the content creation. So you don't actually have to dive into here. What you actually need to do in this whole platform is just use these two up here. You don't have, I mean, this is all these features here are for the data geeks like me. I'm a big data geek. But here, you can have the high-level view. You'll only need these 2 pages. The first page gives you the high-level idea of where you're at per model, how you're doing, your average rank, your citation share, you know, how you're performing versus other players, your brand health and perception, the domains that are actually affecting the models. And this is your action item page, which you want to visit once a week. The report is weekly. You'll get an email, and this will tell you what you have to do for this week. It's going to give you these assignments to create content, and it's going to help you find the content that is most likely going to help you boost your visibility. It's going to show you Reddit posts that you'd want to visit and add a comment on the post if you can that speaks positively about your brand. And then you have also this that talks about, this shows you the domains that you might be able to then add content to or to modify content. So these are highly influencing websites that you might want to have your brand mentioned, either better or mentioned at all in a listicle. And so you could reach out to them and try to get your brand mentioned in their content, or to add maybe a guest post if it's a blog. And we're actually rolling out soon a feature that will help you do this. Click on a button. But you can also do it on your own. So these are your action items, these 3 things. So weekly action items, and they're gonna help you boost your visibility. And we see this working really well with our brands. We have many more features in here. It's packed with things, but these are the 2 main things you wanna look at. So I hope that was insightful. And if there are any questions, reach out. You can reach out to team at get-spotlight.com or directly to me. I'm Michael at get-spotlight.com. And I hope you get a lot of traffic from AI. So until next time.